Okay, you are live.
Excellent. All right, welcome folks for tonight's Halifax West Community Council. Gosh, what is the date? The February 22nd Halifax West Community Council meeting. Really quickly, we'll call the meeting to order and do a roll call, starting with Councillor Mason.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, great. Can hear you and see you. Councillor Cleary.
Hello, everyone from District 9.
Thank you. Councillor Morse.
Hello from District 10. It's 2/22/2022, so it sounds like an auspicious date.
It is, and I heard that this morning from my daughter. It's a conspiracy theory with the
Really?
on TikTok. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. Councillor Cuttle.
Good evening, everyone.
And Councillor Stoddard.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and colleagues.
In really quick point for you, Councillor Stoddard, I got to meet your grandson today when I was presenting at I forget what school it was in Sackville. He was like, "How do you know my nan?" So it was great. Had lots of questions about council.
Yeah, I'm going there on the 28th, so he's
Cool,
so happy.
Cool. Excellent. All right, approval of the minutes, January 18th, 2022. Mover in a second.
Move.
Thank you.
Councillor Cleary.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. All right, got the minutes. So approval of order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Clerk, do we have any additions or deletions?
There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
All right, thank you. Councillor Cuttle, are you still looking to defer an item?
Yes, I'm looking to defer item 13.1.3, case 23-166 until March 8th, 2022.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing further or no questions, a call for a motion to approve the agenda with the item 13.1.3, case 23166, municipal planning strategy amendments for 7 McIntosh Street, Halifax, to be deferred until our next meeting, March 8th.
Mr. Chair, it's Councillor Cleary. Can Councillor Cuttle provide a reason for deferring 13.1.3?
Yep, Councillor Cuttle.
Yep. When we were doing the agenda review, it was my hope to be able to talk to staff prior to this coming forward to Halifax and West Community Council. And given our budget agendas and council last week, that was not able to happen. So I'm just looking to defer until I have the opportunity to talk to staff about this.
Okie dokie.
Any other questions, clarifications folks are wondering before we move on? No? Okay, mover and seconder for the agenda as presented and amended.
I'll move that.
Thank you, Councillor Cuttle moves, seconded by Councillor Mason. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. All right, we have an agenda. So business arising in the minutes, we have none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. Do we have any conflicts from members? Hearing none. Motions of reconsideration, none. Motion of rescission, none. Consideration of deferred business, none. Notice of table matters, none. On to our hearings, and we have all our members here in staff, I believe, in applicant. So 10.1.1 case 23120 Halifax Mainland Land Use Bylaw amendments to change the R2 zone requirements for semi-detached dwellings in mainland South. And again, thank you for joining us. Order of events for this virtual hearing will start with a staff presentation, then give the applicant an opportunity to present, and we'll finish with comments from the public hearing speakers list. As a reminder to all speakers, those watching from home, the deadline to register as a speaker was 4:30 the business day prior to the hearing, which was Monday, January 17th or February 17th. Is that date right? February 17th. There is one speaker registered for this public hearing. All right. So, correspondence? Did we have correspondence for this item?
Yes, correspondence was received for this matter and distributed to the community council.
All right. So we'll go on to the meat of it. Megan Mott, I see you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen here. Is that working? Everyone see my screen? Perfect. Great. Okay. A moment. I'm just going to move my Zoom around here. Okay. So good evening, Chair and Councillors. My name is Megan Mond, and I'm a planner with HRM's Urban Enabled Applications. And tonight I will be presenting for the public hearing of case 23120, which is an application to make changes to the R2 zone of the Halifax Mainland Land Use Bylaw. The applicant for this proposal is Armco Capital Inc., and they're asking to reduce the minimum side yard setback and main building separation distance requirements for semi-detached dwellings in the R2 zone of the Halifax Mainland Land Use Bylaw for lands within the Mainland South Secondary Plan area. While Armco has stated that they're seeking these amendments specifically for their proposed subdivision called Clifton Heights off of the Heron Cove Road behind Mansion Avenue, the proposed amendments would apply to all R2 zone lands within the boundary of the Mainland South Secondary Plan area. So this map, while it is a little bit tricky to see in detail, it does show the boundaries of the Mainland South Secondary Plan area. It is a large area, so it was hard to fit on a slide. But the parcels that are shaded in dark gray are the ones that are zoned R2 that would be affected by this application. Many of these lands are already developed with single and 2-unit dwellings. But there are some larger parcels in the southeastern end of the plan area along Heron Cove Road that have not been developed yet. And the lands where Armco wants to build their subdivision and apply the proposed land use bylaw changes is roughly where that red star is down near the bottom of the screen there. So there are 3 levels of planning documents in HRM. The highest level is the regional plan, and it guides where population growth and investment of services like transit, piped water, and sewer should occur. The second level is community plans, and community plans focus on a specific geographic area and outline where and how different types of development may occur. Often planning applications that require council approval are enabled in community plans. So this application is enabled by the Halifax Municipal Planning Strategy. The third level and most detailed planning document is the Land Use Bylaw. The Land Use Bylaw identifies the zoning of the land and specifies regulations for developing a property. Any development that can meet the Land Use Bylaw regulations can happen without council approval and public engagement. So this application is to amend the Halifax Mainland Land Use Bylaw, and if the proposed amendments are approved, any new or additions to existing semi-detached dwellings that are on land zoned R2 in the Mainland South area would be eligible for the reduced setbacks. The proposed amendments will only apply to land zoned R2 and within the Mainland South Secondary Plan area. The affected lands are mostly designated low density residential, but there are a few that are designated RDD, which is the Residential Development District, under the Halifax Municipal Planning Strategy. Lands that are in the affected area that are already developed, as I mentioned, are primarily developed as single and 2-unit dwellings, which are the uses permitted under the R2 zone. The policy that enables this application is Implementation Policy 3.1.1 of the Halifax Municipal Planning Strategy, which allows council to consider applications to amend the land use bylaw. And I'll get more into the municipal planning strategy policies in a few slides. So this slide highlights the steps involved in an application to make changes to the land use bylaw. So staff have completed a detailed review of the proposal and engaged the public. And now the application is in its final stages. So following the public hearing, council will have to make a decision to approve or refuse the proposal. And then any decision made can be appealed. If the proposal is approved and no appeals are filed within 14 days of the appeal period, then the amendments to the bylaw would take effect. So now I'll get into the details of the proposed amendments. So I created this table to show a comparison between the existing and the proposed land use bylaw requirements, specifically for semi-detached dwellings in the R2 zone. So Armco is asking to change two of the requirements: the side yard setback, which would be the distance the dwelling has to be from the side property line, and the main building separation distance, which is the distance a dwelling has to be from another dwelling or any other main building on an abutting lot. So currently the minimum required side yard setback is 8 feet, and Armco is asked to reduce that to 4 feet. And the minimum required building separation distance is currently 12 feet, and they're asking to reduce that to 8 feet. The minimum lot size requirements are staying the same, so no additional density can be created as a result of the proposed changes. Buildings can't be any larger either because the lot coverage and the building height requirements would remain the same. So the building could have a different footprint, one that's wider but less deep. So as I mentioned, the policy that enables council to consider this application is Implementation Policy 3.1.1, which states the city shall review all applications to amend zoning bylaws or the zoning map in such areas for conformity with the policies of this plan, with particular regard for the residential areas to Section 2, Policy 2.4. So Policy 2.4 of the citywide policies speaks to retaining the character of existing neighborhoods and controlling change so it's compatible with the neighborhood. Policy 1.6 in the Mainland South Secondary Planning Strategy specifies policies is specific to policies in the Mainland South Secondary Plan area, and specifies that policies that maintaining zoning regulations that encourages stability and maintenance of the prevalent character of residential neighborhoods. So the level of engagement for this application was consultation achieved through a mail-out notification. So residents were invited to learn about the proposal by watching a narrated presentation on Shape Your City, which is HRM's online engagement platform, and visiting a webpage with the proposal and process details on halifax.ca. There were also signs posted on the street frontages for the proposed Clifton Heights subdivision that notified residents about the proposal and where to find more information. The mail that we sent went out to about 3,574 residents and property owners of the affected R2 zone lands, as well as all residents and property owners of lots abutting the affected R2 zone lands. And that was in April 2021. And we received feedback from 167 residents and property owners. And then since the webpage went live in November 2020, up until last week, we have received a total of 1,017 page views, a total of which 677 were unique views. The most common comments on the proposal included concerns that there could be an increased risk of fire or spreading of fire, that the changes will only serve to financially benefit the developer, negative impacts on the quality of life and livability of the area, negative effects on the existing character of the established neighborhood, that the scope of the proposal is large in terms of the size of the affected area and the significance of the changes, and concerns about loss of privacy. So while most of the feedback received was not in support of the proposal, there were several comments in support and included the following topics: that side yards do not hold a lot of value, and that there's support for the idea of making housing more affordable. So I just want to take a couple minutes to dive into a couple of the concerns that were raised. So with respect to the concern about increased risk of fire. So the proposed changes do not supersede any of the Nova Scotia Building Code standards, and any new construction or additions to dwellings would require a construction permit. And during the review of the permit application, a building official will ensure that the exposed building face is designed to meet the building code as it relates to the property line and adjacent buildings. And the code is designed to protect buildings and the people and the property inside them from fire and ensure structural integrity. In terms of affecting the character of the established neighborhoods, the affected area is large and consists of multiple neighborhoods, which differ from one another in their age, topography, and natural features, as well as their building typologies. The land use bylaw requirements play a role in shaping the character of the development by placing controls on the siting, massing, and use of development. The proposed amendments are anticipated to have an effect on the character, but the impact will be limited and is not anticipated to change the prevalent character because, firstly, the change will only apply to one type of dwelling, the semi-detached style dwelling in the R2 zone. The changes will only apply to lands in the mainland south area. The rest of the requirements, so for example, the front and rear yard setbacks and lot coverage, will remain the same. No additional density can be achieved, and the side yard can still be used to access the rear yard and the side of the dwelling for landscaping and storage of infrastructure and utilities. So with respect to the scope of the proposed amendments, there are approximately 2,426 lots zoned R2 in the mainland south. Approximately 90% of these lots are already developed, although the lands that are currently vacant do account for a significant portion of the total land mass. In order for the proposed amendments to be limited to Armco's Clifton Heights subdivision, Armco would have had to apply to amend the Halifax municipal planning strategy and ask for site-specific regulations. The applicant was presented with the choice between an amendment to the municipal planning strategy, which would impact fewer properties, but potentially be a longer process, or an amendment to the land use bylaw, which would impact more properties, but could be a more expedient process. The applicant indicated their preference for a land use bylaw amendment. The applicant did suggest different ways to reduce the scope of the application through the land use bylaw amendment process, but these options could be more challenging to implement and administer and could create an unequal distribution of development rights. So the amendments, were limited to only the mainland south secondary plan area rather than to all the R2 zone lands under the Halifax mainland land use bylaw. So to summarize, Armco is asked to change 2 of the Halifax mainland land use bylaw requirements that apply to semi-detached dwellings on land zoned R2 within the mainland south secondary plan area. They've asked to reduce the side yard setback from a minimum of 8 feet to a minimum of 4 feet, and the main building separation distance from a minimum of 12 feet to a minimum of 8 feet. Staff recommend that Halifax and West Community Council adopt the amendments to the land use bylaw for Halifax mainland as set out in attachment A of the staff report. And that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone. Oh, okay, thank you, Councillor Cuttle. Question clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Megan, for that presentation. So I just want to just make sure it's crystal clear that through these amendments, the size of the building, like the square footage of the building, can't change.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So if the lot is exactly at the minimum requirements of a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet and a minimum frontage of 50 feet, the maximum lot coverage is 35%. And so the size of the building couldn't change. The maximum 35% lot coverage would remain the same, capping the footprint at a set square footage. The changes would allow the footprint to be a different shape. It could be wider instead of deeper on the house, but it couldn't be any larger, no.
Right, and the width of the lots still need to be 50 feet.
Exactly, yep. So the minimum lot size is 50 feet. For semi-detached dwellings, there is the ability to subdivide the lot if you have that 50 feet of frontage, and then each unit on either side would have to have that 25 feet of frontage.
All right, and so through this change, it will not result in any increase in homes being allowed on
Correct.
the zone.
Yes.
So the, you know, the density in terms of number of homes will remain the same as it is under the current land use bylaw.
Exactly. Yes. This application, it won't enable any additional density to be created.
Great. And just one last question about the character. And you did note that the character will be slightly affected, but I'm just wondering, how is that assessed?
We looked at a number of different things. So a lot of different things, and I briefly mentioned them, affect the character of a neighborhood. It can be the typology of the building, the topography of the landscape, and the natural features in the area. I mean, you can take, for example, a neighborhood that was developed in the 80s looks quite different maybe than something that was developed in the 40s or the 2000s. And that there's a lot of different things that feed into that to create that character. So we took that into consideration in our policy. And then as well, the land use bylaw does affect, because there are a number of regulations in that bylaw that control how buildings can be placed on a lot, how tall they can be, how much lot coverage they can have. That does play a role in shaping the character. And when we looked at this, because there are a number of different requirements that the land use bylaw does control about how you develop a site, from the height to the front yard setback, the rear yard setback, and that lot coverage, changing one of those requirements, the side yard setback and the main building separation distance as well. That's only affecting one component of how a site is developed, and then again, only one aspect of the character of a neighborhood.
Okay, great. And just one last question about the 4 feet, the minimum 4 feet. So, you know, someone puts up a fence and you have a fence and then you have the building, you got 4 feet. Is there, you know, in that 4 feet, in terms of access to the backs of the lots, are there any kind of rules or best practices, or like how would 4 feet, you know, why not 3 feet or like 6 feet? Like what is it with the 4 feet that makes that appropriate in terms of being able to access the backs of the lots?
So the 4 feet was proposed by the applicant. That's what they requested. We didn't explore alternatives of 3 feet or 5 feet instead. But I think that 4 feet, it still is a width that is wide enough to allow you to still access your rear yard. And based on looking through Google Maps and my own experience, exploring how people use their side yards, a lot of people use it just to access their rear yards in these smaller suburban or urban style lots. So it's for access and storage of infrastructure or garbage cans like that. And that 4 feet still would allow you to have the same function in that side yard. The applicant may be able to speak to why they specifically chose that 4 feet rather than 3 feet or another number as well.
All right. So there's no requirement to be able to get a vehicle.
Sorry, no, yes, not from a land use bylaw perspective. And as far as I know, not from a building code perspective, but of course, when an application is submitted, if something was triggered through any of the other review agencies, then they would have to also meet those regulations. And if that was one of the regulations, they would have to meet that.
Okay, thank you very much, Megan.
Can anyone hear me? Oh, I got kicked out, so I'm not sure where we're at.
Patty, just finish your question.
Okay, thanks. Nobody else has any questions?
Counselor Smith, it's
Yeah.
Christopher from the clerk's office. We should be okay. Do you know where you got kicked out from?
Just in the last like 5 seconds.
Okay. Maybe Megan, if you could just quickly reiterate sort of just your last piece for Counselor Smith.
Happy to. So, Mr. Chair, Councillor Cuddle was asking about whether or not there were any regulations relating to how wide a side yard had to be and kind of the rationale between choosing 4 feet, why not 3 feet or another number and that sort of thing. So I was just explaining that there are no regulations for that in terms of the land use bylaw perspective. I don't think there is from the building code perspective, but of course, when anybody submits a permit application, they would have to meet the requirements from any of the review agencies that are signing off on a permit application. From my own perspective, the 4 foot side yard, that is what the applicant asked for. So that's what we move forward with. And 4 feet would still allow you to have many of the same functions that you do in these urban and suburban lots for your side yard.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just let you, I've been having Zoom issues today. So if I get kicked out, I'll just let you guys know so we can go backwards. So I'm going to go to invite the applicant to address community council. And I believe Mark Olette is presenting today.
Yep.
Hey, Mark. Yeah, can hear
Okay.
you and see you. I feel like we're family. The amount of times you're representing the council and the community council. So you have 10 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Mark Willett. I'm the planning manager for Armco Capital, the applicant on this file. I'll be making a presentation this evening in support of our application. Next slide, please. Armco owns approximately 122 acres on the southwestern side of Herring Cove Road in Spryfield, found within the urban service boundary in Zone R2. The site is generally bounded by Herring Cove Road, Mansion Road, and Woodcrest Avenue. Armco also owns additional land zone holding outside the service boundary, denoted by the dashed line running fairly parallel to Herring Cove Road. Next slide, please. Armco is proposing semi-detached dwellings within our Green Acres subdivision. As Megan mentioned previously, the current side yard setbacks applicable to this unit type in the R2 zone in mainland south is 8 foot with a required separation distance of 12 feet. While these requirements have applied for a long time, and it's technically possible to build units to fit the requirement, it doesn't allow a lot of flexibility and prevents home buyers from obtaining a desired layout within the minimum required lot frontage of 50 feet. The example of this slide shows a 3-story semi-detached dwelling with a garage on the first level. The width of the units at 17 feet maximizes the width under current requirements with the 8-foot setbacks. Next slide, please. This slide contains the floor plans for the same semi. The first floor contains the garage and a rec room. Please take note that the rec room can only be accessed internally through the garage, which is not ideal. The garage is also rather small. Opening car doors would be difficult. The second floor has a country kitchen and living room with a half bath. And the third floor only has 2 bedrooms. It has stacked laundry and 2 bathrooms. The main issue is that most families would require 3 bedrooms on the same floor. Well, I've seen 3 bedrooms in 17-foot semis before. These tend to be older design with an awkward layout and much smaller bedrooms. To fit the third bedrooms, you would definitely have to sacrifice one of the bathrooms and the laundry facility on the top floor. One of the bedrooms will also have its window opening on the side yard. It has gotten more difficult in recent years to squeeze more rooms out of a given space due to accessibility requirements, more specifically the 36 inches door widths. When you open the door, it has to go somewhere. This affects furniture layout and required room dimensions. Next slide, please. This slide contains an example of an elevation containing 21-foot wide units. On a 50-foot wide lot, the side yard setbacks would need to be 4 feet to fit this design. This is why we required the 4 feet, but there's a second reason why we require 4 feet is that 4 feet, that's the minimum setback under the National Building Code where you can have openings such as windows and doors. Next slide, please. This slide contains the floor plans for the previous semi-elevation. The first floor contains a larger garage space, as well as a den, office, and full bathroom that can be accessed internally without going through the garage. Additional space at the back, including the washroom, would make it possible to easily convert to a secondary suite which is not the case in the 17-foot wide units. In addition, with more people working from home since COVID, people are looking for residential units that can accommodate an office space. The second floor is similar to the floor plan from the 17-foot wide units, except it's bigger and allowing more separation between the strictly kitchen and dining functions. The third floor has 3 bedrooms most families want, with 2 full baths and generous laundry area. The fenestration is identical between the 2 types of units, favoring the front and back, with window openings to the side yard only on the second floor. Next slide, please. This slide lists the top 6 concerns that came out of the public participation program. These would be responses to the mailouts. In first place would be the perceived increased risk of fire. In response, I can say that the building code would apply to the design of the units, and building officials would review before issuing a building permit. There are numerous examples of similar setbacks used in HRM, such as on the peninsula and in downtown Dartmouth. 4 feet is the minimum setback, like I said, for openings. And further away from the property boundary that you get, the bigger openings can be. The Halifax Fire Department would also have been made aware of this application and would have had a chance to comment. There are ways to address concerns with fire spread with the proposed setbacks. This is not an unusual situation. In second place were comments that it would only serve to increase the financial benefits to the developer. We hear this a lot, but I don't think it is relevant to the discussion. What I will say is that Armco is definitely not in the business to lose money. The fact that we have been involved in development in HRM for 40 years shows that we have done a few things right. The statement also ignores the fact that land development requires a lot of capital, which means there's a lot of risk involved. We are simply managing risk by listening to our home builders who are telling us what buyers want in a home. I don't think it would benefit HRM to put on the market units that we would have trouble selling. In third place was the perceived negative impact on quality of life, livability in the area. My response to that would be that the setbacks that's currently proposed are not very different than what you would currently see on a number of streets in the South End. I don't believe many people would argue that there is a poor quality of life in these neighborhoods. In fact, the standard side yard setback requirement for semi-detached dwellings under the established residential zone 2 and 3 under center plan is 4 feet. Furthermore, when we made the application, we meant to apply it to our proposed project, not necessarily existing neighborhoods. While streetscapes are important for quality of life, so are interior layouts of residential units. In fourth place, it is the perceived negative effect on existing character of established neighborhoods. As mentioned before, our intention was to have a different setbacks for our development. While we are not opposed to extending these setbacks throughout mainland South, we understand that some residents may be reluctant in having current setbacks change. This is why we propose ways of limiting the applicability of these amendments, which I will discuss in the next slide. Furthermore, as mentioned previously, the setback changes, if applied throughout mainland South, are for semi-detached dwellings in the R2 zone. It is highly unlikely that someone with an existing semi-detached dwelling would incur huge costs for an addition to extend a wall by 4 feet. I'm not saying that it would never happen, but most people would not proceed after doing a simple cost-benefit analysis. In fifth place was the perception that the area affected by the amendments and the scope of the proposals are too large. Again, Armco outlined to the planning staff ways to limit the extent of the land use bylaw amendments, which will be covered next slide. In sixth place was the perceived loss of privacy. I would argue that most people treasure their backyard for privacy, not their side yards. Again, the amendments sought were for our development. Buyers would understand what they are purchasing. If they don't like it, they don't have to buy from us. It is worth noting that our home builders are taking risks themselves and have done their research and are telling us that these units with the 21-foot layouts are in high demand and will sell with 4-foot setbacks. Next slide, please. This slide covers methods to limit the extent of the land use bylaw amendments as presented by Armco to planning staff. We indicated that the land use bylaw could only apply to properties created after the effective date of the amendments. Properties where the side yards in question are measured from boundaries in common with lots also created after the effective date of the amendment. For the construction of new dwellings, it would not apply to additions to existing dwellings and properties that are located south of Heron Cove Road. It's our understanding from discussions with planning staff that the last one would require an MPS amendment and thus could not be considered under this process. However, we feel that the other options would provide enough protection if council chooses to limit the applicability of the proposed side yard setback amendments. Next slide, please. In summary, Armco believes that current home buyers' preferences warrant a re-examination of side yard setback requirements in the R2 zone. We feel that 4-foot setbacks are acceptable for new development areas. While we are open to the idea of applying the proposed amendments throughout mainland South, we understand there are concerns from residents of existing neighborhoods regarding potential changes to their area. To that effect, we have proposed ways of limiting the extent of where the setback changes could occur. In closing, I would like to thank staff for the hard work they put into the file and for council in allowing us to present tonight. I will remain available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone with questions of clarification? I don't see any. Really quickly, Mark, just for me, you answered a lot of it during the presentation, but you mentioned the desired layout. And that's why part of the reason why you made the request for the side yard. Can you just, and maybe the slide would be helpful if we could get that slide back up that had the layout. Can you just expand a little bit more on what desired layout means?
Yeah, if you can go back to the, I think it's slide number 6.
You could have the,
Getting that up for you.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, this one. So there's a limitation to how deep you typically put a house because the further away you are from windows, the darker it is on the inside. So over here we have a 36-foot width, depth. So by going wider, we don't have to go that deep to accommodate all the rooms. And typically, like on semi-detached, like most of your fenestration is in the back and in the front. You have limited number of windows on the side, even on an 8-foot setback. You typically would try to prioritize the front and the back because that's where you're going to get the most light. So if you want to fit more, you got to go deeper, which creates problem. But also, it's not very effective to fit that third bedroom on that third floor, just because typically you want like 10-foot wide bedrooms. So if you have a 21-foot wide unit, you can easily fit 2 bedrooms in the front or back and the master bedroom on the other side. When you're going deeper and you're narrow, you got to kind of slide that third bedroom in. And I've been in some units that were 17 feet wide. I've seen them when I used, like years ago when I used to work at HRM to review these plans. And it was always an awkward type of layout. You had these odd hallways and you had like a bedroom on the side, one in the front and one in the back. It's not what people like to see these days. Plus, as I mentioned, with the new accessibility requirements, which require 36-inch doors, when you're opening those doors, like if you have a small bedroom, it might hit the bed. So the way that we're laying it out is much more efficient. We're not trying to build something that a size that's not permitted on that lot. And when you're looking at lot coverage, we're not trying to add additional density. We're just trying to reduce that setback, make it wider to have a more efficient layout internally.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. All right, so nobody else is asked to speak, so we're going to move on to the public hearing. So any member of the public who has registered with the clerk's office will be given 5 minutes to speak. When I call your name, you may unmute your mic and begin speaking. Each speaker is asked to begin by stating their name and the community in which they reside. For the record, keep your comments respectful, on topic, and directed to the chair, me. And once you finish your comments and answer any questions of clarification, please leave the Zoom meeting and watch the rest of the meeting using the webcast. So as mentioned earlier, we have one speaker scheduled this evening. And that speaker is Archiles Kizel. Sorry if I'm pronouncing and butchering your name, so correct me if you are here this evening. Archiles? Archiles?
Looks like he's muted, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
Achilles, it's Krista. We're just trying to unmute you. Press *6 to unmute yourself.
Why don't we take 6:42? Why don't you take a quick break, come back at 6:45, and maybe clerk, you can try to reach out and get them on the phone. Yeah, we'll take a quick couple-minute break, and we'll come back at 6:45.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, hi,
Hello?
Achilles.
Oh my gosh, this has been a nightmare.
Well,
This has been, oh God.
we can hear you. Do I still got all my colleagues here before they run away? And
It looks like you do, Counselor Smith, so it's up to you how you'd like to proceed.
okay,
I need to get centered here because I've just been frantic, just trying to do different devices and, you know, and I've been pressing *6 and nothing's been happening. And I just got through out of fluke just now.
okay,
So,
well,
yeah, I heard you say you're going to go to 6:45. You're going to take a little break for 6:45. I'm good. I need that.
Okay.
And maybe I can speak to Krista or someone. I have no idea. I'm flying blind. I have no idea what was going on.
all right.
I did hear the gentleman prior, just the last 2 minutes.
Okay, I don't see Councillor Mason, so Councillor Mason might have jumped off. So we'll come back at 6:45.
I'm right here. I'm right here.
Oh, you're
Sorry.
here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we do have everybody. So if you're ready, the floor is yours if you're set.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
But we're gonna give this a go. We need to meet in person. This is bad.
I couldn't agree more. So you have 5 minutes.
So, okay, not knowing what was said earlier, and okay, I'm just speaking to this because, I'm very adamant about protecting the environment and the character of the neighborhoods that exist currently, and maybe designated as R2. Now, I read through some of these things, and I appreciate that the applicant, Mr. Armoyan or Armco, provided some options on the rezoning things R2. And I'm sorry if I'm not using the same language. I am literally fried right now, but and I was wondering, why we don't do things in a case-by-case basis, because that will maintain the character of the neighborhoods. That anything that's special about it will be there. I provided a copy. Actually, I just drew something out, and I think some of you have it right now. I hope. It was just a draft. Okay. And on the draft, I looking at what you folks have mentioned and keeping in mind the dimensions that you put forth, okay, I just thought, okay, we have a street here, and let's say it has a whole bunch of houses on it, and they are designated R2. One side of the road, that's the base of the page that you're looking at, has 4 lots, and they're 50-foot wide lots. Okay, what would happen is if a developer came in and purchased 4 lots on the opposite side of the road, and then leveled them, and then reassigned the boundaries, Okay, I don't speak developer speak, but reassign the boundaries, and honored what you folks had in that R2 amendment, you would end up actually increasing the density by 100% in that area, and that would substantially change a neighborhood, especially if it was a narrow street, like a neighborhood with a narrow street and it's mature trees. That would change the look drastically. And so I'm wondering what's in there to protect existing neighborhoods from that kind of development. I mean, that would look, I went out and looked at houses that had 8 feet between them. And yeah, that, you know, if you wanted a neighborhood that's more increased value, you would avoid this. I don't know if that makes sense. I literally am at a disadvantage right now.
I'm not sure how much time you have left, but you can continue. You didn't get your 30-second warning yet, so if you have more, you can share.
That's basically it. I'm concerned about neighborhoods and maintaining the character, and I feel that if you just do a blanket or change in the an amendment and just do a blanket, just treat everyone the same as R2, you lose those characteristics, those unique neighborhoods. And yeah, that's it.
Well, we appreciate you coming this evening, working through the technical difficulties. As you said, I hope that we get to a place where we can do this in person, where you can just speak and not have to deal with technology. What will happen, so how the public hearing works is the comments and questions that you have, we do give the applicant opportunity to answer them if they so wish. Also, members of council can ask questions of clarification as well as we move forward. And I do see Councillor Cuddle has a question of clarification for you.
Hi, Achilles. How are you?
Hello.
Hi.
I'm good, Patty. How are you? Hi.
I'm well, thanks. I'm just wondering if you were aware that the land that we're talking about doing this amendment to is already zoned R2 and already permits semi-detached homes.
Are you referring to the first Mr. Armoyan's first section, like that community development, that subdivision he's putting in?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you're aware that the changes that are being proposed tonight are only applying to land that is already zoned R2.
Yes.
And it already
I'm aware.
permits semi-detached homes.
Yes.
Okay, so through these
Yeah.
changes, then you know that we're not proposing to double the density of what's already permitted.
I understand that, but I'm just thinking of future use. What would stop someone from, now that they know that they can do this, going to an existing neighborhood that has some R2 homes, R2 lots. Let's just say that there's 4 adjacent lots, and they just go and clear everything all out and put these up.
Okay, because you're only, do you know that you're only allowed to do semi-detached homes on property? I'm so sorry.
So just really quickly,
Okay, but
yeah, thank you. I guess that was a cue for you, Councillor Cuttle. I'm not sure. All right. So again, thank you for being here this evening. And as mentioned, if there's some further comments, the applicant will have an opportunity to address them, and many members of council can also take any of your questions or comments and address them later. So thank you for working with the technical difficulties, and thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Difficulties in barking dogs. Sorry.
Right. No, not a worry. All right, so that is the end of our public speakers. So I asked the applicant if they have any comment to respond to before we close the public hearing.
Yeah, just to respond from the previous comments, I do understand there's people that are concerned about the changes to the setbacks for existing neighborhoods, but I believe there's a way or means to mitigate the potential issues. Not everybody would go buy a house or an existing semi, tear it down to build closer. And as I mentioned before, there's quite a bit of cost to do in addition to an existing semi to bring it 4 feet closer to our property boundary. So I think, like, realistically, you wouldn't see a lot of changes happening in a lot of these neighborhoods. I'm not saying it could not happen, but if there's concerns about existing neighborhoods, there's ways of limiting the applicability of the land use bylaw amendments. I'm not sure whether councillors would entertain such a thing, but it's something that they can consider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so after motion to close the public hearing. Moved by Councilor Mason, seconded by Councilor Tuttle. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. All right, who wants to put the motion on the floor?
I can put the motion on the floor.
Thank you, Councilor.
Sorry, I did have it here. Oh, here we go.
In the chat too.
Thank you. I move that Halifax and West Community Council adopt the amendment to the land use bylaw for Halifax mainland as set out in attachment A of the staff report dated November 3rd, 2021.
Seconded by.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilor Morse. Councilor Cottle.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have received a lot of comments from folks, some emails and on social media and some phone calls about concerns. And I think a lot of the concerns have been addressed with the presentation, mainly that this is not going to result in an increased number of lots. It's not going to result in an increased number of houses. And it's not going to result in an increase of density in terms of like building footprint per acre. What it is going to do primarily is reduce the side yard setback. And I guess the main question then is 4 feet a reasonable side yard for houses. And you know, when you look around, I think there's lots of examples where, you know, particularly if you look on the peninsula where there's even like narrower spaces between houses, and I do feel that the 4 feet is adequate to be able to get a wheelbarrow or construction supplies or gardening supplies through to a backyard, even a you know, a small tractor if required for putting in a swimming pool if so desired. So I think that when, you know, we kind of weigh the pros and the cons of all of this, and we kind of look at what's being asked for and how it actually enables a lot more flexibility around unit design. I think that this is an acceptable amendment. You know, there's lots of examples within Spryfield where we do have the narrower houses, the taller, narrower houses, and you know, some of those layouts, you know, can be awkward to work with, and I get that point, and I hear that point, and I think any opportunity to have more light, to have more windows in a building, which is what I hope the developer is going to do, is you know, is a benefit overall. So I have thought about this and thought about this carefully. I have listened to everyone's concerns. I hear the concerns about the fire risk, and I'm glad that that Megan pointed out that this is still all needs to meet Nova Scotia Fire building code regulations. And I feel that this is an acceptable amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary.
Actually, I think Councillor Connell summed it up pretty well. I'm good.
All right, excellent. All right, so if nobody else has any further questions or comments or debate, I'll ask for the question on the motion.
Question.
Questions been called. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, that passes. Thank you, colleagues. Moving to our next item, which is case 10.1.2, case 20226, Land Use Bylaw Amendment to reduce parking requirements for community centers in Timberley, Lakeside, Beachville. Again, as mentioned, this is a public hearing, and in order to take part in this public hearing, as a reminder, all speakers and those watching from home, the deadline to register as a speaker was 4:30 a business day prior to the hearing. And we have no speakers signed up for this item. So I will ask if there's any correspondence on this item, which I believe there is none.
Yes, actually, there was one piece of correspondence received today and circulated to Community Council.
All right, great, thank you. And go to the presentation, Mr. Sean Gillis.
Hello, councillors, Mr. Chair.
Hey.
Just sorting out how to do this. Feels like it's first time every time. Give me 2 seconds here, please.
No worries. I'll just take the time to admire your curtains. I love them.
Thank you. I will tell my daughter since I'm hanging out in her room. Oh, I have to share my screen first. Okay, great. Okay.
Sean, if you could just, there you go.
Okay, we're great. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience.
Floor is yours.
So as mentioned, this is a small piece of case 20226. And that larger case involves the Beachville Planning Strategy Review, and also the Beachville Community Benefits Action Plan, which was initiated by Regional and Council. So public engagement is ongoing for the bigger part of case 20226, but as part of that, essentially planning staff became aware of some problems with the land use bylaw, the parking requirements for the community centers in Beachville, Lakeside, Timberley. So that's the what we're talking about tonight. So the Lakeside Community Center, right now, HRM is working on a design for this new center, and the team doing the design has found that the existing parking requirements in the land use bylaw would be a burden and would require a large parking lot, really beyond the needs or the desire of the proposed recreation center, which would be about 30,000 square feet. So the existing parking requirements would mean 307 parking spaces would be needed, and that would be on a approximately 3-acre lot. So that's a lot of parking, but what does that look like? So I looked around a bit to see what that might look like. And 300 parking spaces, this is just a view of the Dartmouth Sportplex. So rink, gym, pool, community uses, a regional center, very big. So that red line gives you 300 parking spaces, about 110,000 square feet of parking. So what I'm trying to show you here is just how much that would be. So in Beachville, a proposed 30,000 square foot facility would require over 3.5 times the buildable area devoted to parking alone. So in the ballpark of the Sportsplex. So this is why staff is recommending we need to change these requirements. They're not reasonable. So the policy that we have in place right now is also telling us that we should look at this, look at a lot of parking requirements, but in particular, the regional parking strategy from 2008. It says that current parking bylaws outside of the Halifax Peninsula would include this one, generally require more parking than is needed. The Integrated Mobility Plan from 2017 directs that we amend municipal planning strategies and land use bylaws to reduce parking requirements. And I'd also point out that the plan itself in this area says that the bylaw shall require parking of an adequate size to provide for the needs of users of the facility and to address potential offsite impacts. And the basic argument from staff is that we're not requiring adequate parking, we're requiring an enormous amount of over parking. So we're not actually really meeting the policy goals either by having this much parking required for these uses. So the proposed amendments to the land use bylaw would reduce the minimum parking requirements for community centers and recreational facilities in the Beachville Lakeside Timberley plan area. So the existing minimum standard is one space for 100 square feet of gross floor area. So the spaces required for that ballpark 30,000 square foot rec center would be 307 under the existing, and proposed we have one space for 500 square feet of gross floor area, and that would require 62. So 30,000 square feet is rounding. That's why we get the 307. But essentially, what staff is proposing is reducing the parking requirements for these two uses, community centers and recreation facilities, by a fifth. So again, staff's recommendation would be to adopt the proposed amendments to the land use bylaw for Timberley, Lakeside, and Beachville to reduce the parking requirements for recreation facilities and for community centers. And the reasoning for that, just again to run down, as the proposed, the reduction would apply only to community centers and recreation facilities, which are generally public or community facilities. So why I think that's important to point out is we have a design team from HRM working on this project, and they have an idea of how much parking is reasonable. I don't think we need the bylaw telling them they need way more than that. Second, a small number of these facilities are built, so this change is likely to have a minimal impact. This particular land use bylaw dates back to the 1990s, and at this point, we've never reviewed it, suggesting that it may not have even been used for these kind of uses because it's a really huge amount of parking. I can't see anyone being able to meet this, actually. Reduced parking requirements allow for flexibility to right-sized parking based on the location and the site conditions, not just a blanket requirement. And reducing parking also allows for better design. You have a smaller parking lot if required, and so you have a lot of different potential for design as opposed to a very large parking lot like this would require. And as mentioned before, the recommendation would really bring the land use bylaw more in line with the strategy, which says adequate parking. And we would suggest that the current land use bylaw regulations require excessive amounts of parking. So that's all I have for presentation, but of course can answer any questions if council so wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions or clarification from members? Not seeing none. Oh, yes, Councilor Morse.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't know if this is within the scope or not, but was there any study of the transit links and provisions for this recreation center as part of the discussion for the amount of parking spaces needed?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, the current service level of transit is generally one trip in each direction every hour. And we didn't really look at that. We looked at the fact that it's almost impossible to physically fit that much parking on site, which suggests this is a big problem. So we didn't specifically look at transit. We looked at the requirements itself.
Okay, that's great.
All right. Moving on. Oh, I lost my place. Sorry. One sec, folks. All right. So we had no one signed up for the public participation. So, and we are the applicant. So I want to ask the applicant to come forward. So I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Moore. Oh, sorry, I saw your mic off. Councilor Stutter, I'll give the second to you. Public hearing is closed. I'm assuming, Mr. Gillis, you don't need to respond to yourself. So I want to ask you to come back. So I'll ask for what are the wishes of the community council?
Would you like me to read the motion?
Please, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It is recommended that Halifax and West Community Council adopt the amendment to the Land Use Bylaw for Timberley Lakeside Beachville as set out in Attachment A of the staff report dated November 3rd, 2021. I so move.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Cuttle. Councilor Stoddard.
Sean pretty much summed it up. I've received a lot of positive feedback about the new community center. It's going to replace the one that's there. There is a bus at the present location. It runs more frequently during the rush hours, but we think it's sufficient. We're trying to, another reason, good reason that the parking is being reduced. It also encourages our mobility, active mobility plan in such that we want to encourage people to walk, ride, or roll, right? So I think where it's such a residential area, you'll probably see a lot more, less cars because people will be able to walk and they are walking to the community as it is. So I don't see that that's going to change. And if there was a tournament or something on, there is available parking behind on the side street and also on St. Marcus Bay Road within, you know, the limits of the parking zone. So I think it is, it's encouraging to have the parking reduced in this particular area for the community center. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else have comments, questions? No? All right. Call for the question.
Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, that passes. Thank you, Sean. Moving on to correspondence, petitions, delegations. Clerk, correspondence.
Yes, Mr. Chair, as noted earlier, correspondence was received for items 10.1.1 and 10.1.2 and circulated to Community Council.
Thank you. Any petitions from members?
There's no petitions received from the clerk's office.
All right. Presentations, we have none. Information items brought forward, we have none. Reports. And I'll ask Councilor Cuttle if you can take the chair because these two are mine, starting with 13.1.1.
All right, gladly. And I believe we have a staff presentation. We're on 13.1.1, case 22523, amending development agreement for the corner of Gottagen and Bilby Streets. And there's Brittany. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see that there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Just gonna move my slide over here. Okay, ready to go. So good evening. My name is Brittany McLean. I'm a planner with the Urban Enabled Applications team here with HRM. Tonight, I'm here with an application for non-substantive amendments to an existing development agreement at the corner of Gottagen and Bilby Streets in Halifax. So Breakhouse Architecture, on behalf of the property owner, Urban Capital Incorporated, is applying for non-substantive amendments to an existing development agreement, again on the lands at the corner of Gottagen and Bilby Streets. And this is to enable changes to the previously approved 8-story mixed-use building at the site. So this site here is outlined in red. It's located across Gottagen Street from the Canadian military base Stadacona. In the surrounding area are 2-story homes, commercial businesses, and a few newly constructed 7 to 8-story mixed-use buildings. It directly abuts a group of lots located on Gottagen and Macara, and these lots are under a development agreement for an 8-story mixed-use building, which has not yet been constructed. So this application was applied for in August 2019. So at the time, 3 of the 4 lots had been designated under Center Plan Package A. However, the remaining lot, I've got it here outlined in blue, was still located within the Halifax plan area. So this caused a few complications. The application had to be put on hold, and both the applicant and property owner patiently waited until the 4th property was redesignated under the recently approved Center Plan Package B. So with the approval of Package B, the entire site now has enabling policy in order to make those non-substantive changes. So this is a street view image from the corner of Gottagen and Bilby. This photo was taken a little while ago. Right now, there's also a little construction trailer on this site as well that's owned by the developer. So the site currently has a vacant commercial building, you can see there with the red arrow, and an accessory building at the back. So there's a bit of application history that I'm going to go through on this property. It all started in October 2013. So that's when Halifax and West Community Council approved an amendment to the Halifax Peninsula Land Use Bylaw at the time to apply Schedule Q to 3 properties. So this Schedule Q zoning amendment enabled the development agreement process to consider a comprehensive development proposal at this location. So in January 2014, the next year, Halifax and West Community Council then approved a development agreement on the 3 properties to permit a mixed-use 7-story building. So since that approval, the developer acquired the abutting property fronting on Gottagen Street. So in November 2018, again, it was before Halifax and West Community Council, they approved the application of Schedule Q on that new additional property that the property owner had purchased, and then approved an amending agreement to allow additional commercial floor space, an additional 24 residential units, and an extra story to the building. And at the time, the inclusion of that additional property into the development agreement lands. So now it was across all 4 properties. So the properties have since changed owners. That building had still not been built. And so now we have Breakhouse Architecture on behalf of the new property owner applying for another round of non-substantive amendments to the existing development agreement. And that's to enable changes to the previously approved 8-story mixed-use building. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of that planning history and background as well. This is one of the main reasons that the application had to be put on hold for a little while. So the site was previously designated major commercial under the Halifax Municipal Planning Strategy and Zone C2 general commercial under the Halifax Peninsula Land Use Bylaw, which again no longer exists. So when Regional Center Plan Package A came into effect in November of 2019, the 3 properties fronting along Gottagen Street were designated corridor under the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy, the RCSMPS, and zoned corridor under that land use bylaw. So the 4th property, as I mentioned on Bilby Street, still remained under the Halifax MPS policy until Center Plan Package B last fall was approved by Regional Council. So the 4th property is now designated high order residential, and that's under Center Plan policy, and also zoned high order residential under the land use bylaw for the regional center. So now the entire site is within the regional center develop and the developmental lands being regulated by the plan and for the bylaw for the regional center area. So within the regional center policy, there's policies IM 30 and IM 33. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them yet, but they're transition policies of the regional MPS, which permits council to consider any complete applications for non-substantive development agreements that were on file with the municipality on or before the date of the first publication of the notice of the intention of council to adopt the regional center MPS under the policies that were in effect of the date of that notice. So what that means is that the policy has now been assessed under the policy that was in effect at the time of the submission. So that would have been the policies from the Halifax MPS, which are no longer in the Halifax MPS. But those are policies 2.3.1 and 2.3.2. So policy 2.3.3 of the Halifax MPS enables these agreements for mixed use developments over 4 units pursuant to those sub policies. Subject to considerations that include the mitigation of impacts on adjacent properties through effective urban design and landscape treatment, and also the creation of high quality design at street level, high quality exterior construction materials, and high quality open space and leisure areas for the residents. So those are the policies that we've done our review under. So the existing agreement that was approved by Halifax and West Community Council enables an 8-story mixed-use building with 63 residential units and the option for 2 additional units that could be permitted on the ground floor. A minimum of 25 of those units are to be 2 or more bedrooms. It enables ground floor commercial uses limited to those like minor commercial zones, so minor commercial uses, sorry. A minimum of 41 internal vehicular parking spaces, a minimum of 2,500 square feet of landscaped open space and recreational space. A minimum of that is to be in the form of a landscaped open space patio on the 2nd level, and that's a shared patio for residents. And then the building has a maximum building height of 85 feet. And then there's also controls on architectural requirements, landscaping, bike parking, signage, and vehicle parking. Okay, so the requested non-substantive amendments listed in that existing development agreement are from the developer: increased building height. So they're asking for interior floor-to-floor height changes, not any additional stories. So they, with the height increasing on those floors, it would be going from 85 feet maximum to 90 feet. The developer is also requesting changes to the building step backs at upper levels. This is due to safety step back requirements from recently installed power lines by Nova Scotia Power, and I'll explain a little bit about that situation in a few moments. They're also asking for changes to the building cladding materials. Changes to the articulation and fenestration of balconies, an increase in the residential unit count from 63 to 71. They're also looking at including more 2-bedroom units from 28, which was originally approved, to 60. They're also asking for increase in landscape open space and recreational space. They are showing a total of 10,202 square feet combined. So that's much more than what was in the original agreement. And finally, they're asking for an increase of bicycle parking spaces to meet those land use bylaw requirements. So building step back changes are proposed from the 2nd floor up. So there's 2 step backs. One of those, you've got your podium, and then from the 3rd level to the 7th level, there would be a step back from both streets. And then another at the 8th level, the penthouse level at the top. So there's no changes to the most sensitive step backs on the east side of the abutting existing residential. So that would be, if you look at the Bilby Street side, the lot to the left of that has like a lower low density residential housing. And that setback there is not being changed. So during this application process, it was put on hold for a little while. it was actually found out that Nova Scotia Power had installed new power lines on Bilby Street. So this caused the applicant during the application process to have to adjust the building design in order to be safely set back from the power lines. So in result, there's minor changes to the step backs fronting Gottagen and Bilby Streets, and the step back from the 3rd to 7th levels at Bilby Street is now stepped back further from Bilby to avoid proximity to those recently installed power lines. So the northern step backs, so if you look, you can see Gottagen Street to the right, the property at the top of that top property line, which has an existing development agreement for another 8-story mixed-use building. Those setbacks are proposed closer to that property boundary line. Again, it's required because of that shift from the power lines on the other side on Bilby Street. So just to confirm again, the property line abuts the approved development agreement for a very similar 8-story mixed-use building, which has not yet been constructed. So here's the proposed Gottagen Street elevation. The shift in building to the right illustrates the resulting clearances from the newly installed power lines along Bilby Street there. Here's the proposed Bilby Street elevation. So you can see that there's no change to the step backs along the sensitive property line, which abuts the low scale residential. For community engagement, the process was consistent with the intent of the HRM community engagement strategy. So the level of engagement that we completed was consultation achieved through providing information and seeking comments through our HRM website on halifax.ca, signage posted on the subject site, and then a postcard mailed to 1,084 property owners within the notification area. So there, or sorry, 73 mailouts. There was 1,084 unique page viewers over the course of the application who spent an average of 2 minutes and 35 seconds on the page. During that whole application process, there was no public comments or concerns received regarding this application. So on March 9th, 2020, the Halifax Peninsula PAC recommended that the application be approved, subject to a few considerations. So I'm just going to go through those and how the applicant responded to them. The first one was that additional landscaping on the west side be considered to soften the transition to the neighboring property. So the applicant responded that the existing development agreement for the property dictates the full lot coverage on the ground level to the perimeter of the property line on all sides. So non-substantive amendments listed in the existing agreement do not permit significant changes to the building footprint. So as such, it's not possible to landscape this area. And something I just want to point out is that this transition policy is only allowing non-substantive changes to that amending agreement. So there is a list of things that we were able to change with this agreement, and there are a number of things that we are not allowed to touch as part of the application as well. And again, as the applicant pointed out there, any kind of landscaping and changing the footprint of that building cannot be changed through a non-substantive process. The second consideration was that the size of the units, there was concern, over the size of the units and the number of bedrooms per unit. So the applicant responded that the development proposes unit designs that are similar to those in urban capitals to other HRM developments. Not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're Southport and Gorsebrook Park. So their units are carefully designed to maximize access to natural light, provide comfortable balcony sizes. And there's a variety of unit sizes and plans to appeal to as broad of an audience as possible. The variety of unit types and sizes were improved from the original development agreement with the intention of attracting a wider demographic. So more 2+ bedroom units are in this design. The final consideration that PAC had was that there be additional privacy measures on the sides of the building abutting residential homes. So the applicant's response to that concern was that the development intends to be sensitive to the adjacent properties, and there are elements to the building massing and organization that addresses privacy. So there's one multi-unit residential building immediately to the west and one to the north of the property. On both the west and north sides, the building has a significant setback above the first level, such that the spaces abutting the neighboring properties are outdoor spaces that provide a buffer for occupants on both sides. For levels above the second floor, the units have been designed with inset balconies to provide additional privacy. It's also worth noting that the property to the north has a development agreement in place to place a mixed-use building in a very similar scale to this one. So the proposed development agreement addresses the following matters. There's schedule replacements for site plan and building elevations, because there was a change in a few building materials and the design of the building. There's quite a few more windows now, you can see in those elevations that I showed earlier. Residential uses limited to a maximum of 71 units, with a minimum of 30 of those units containing 2 or more bedrooms. So the applicant's proposing 60, but in our agreement, we just did incremental changes. So there's a minimum of 30, but the developer can still provide 60. Anything over 30, they can still provide. The maximum building height of 91 feet. And to include aluminum railings and glazing to the list of acceptable cladding materials. And then the other was an increased landscaped open space and recreational space minimum requirement of 2,730 square feet minimum. So for a policy review, the Halifax MPS requires that council consider the relationship of new development to adjacent properties and then the mitigation of impacts on the amenity, convenience, and development potential of adjacent properties through effective urban design and landscape treatment. So the existing development agreement addresses design and compatibility issues using requirements which the proposed amending agreement remains consistent with. The design of the proposed building includes measures to reduce land use conflict from neighboring properties, including step backs from the 3rd to 7th stories and additional step backs on the 8th. The proposed street wall heights along Gottagen is consistent with the heights of the neighboring buildings along Gottagen as well. The building height in the proposed amending agreement allows for an additional 5 feet of height to incorporate the requested changes in floor-to-floor height and structural changes, but the additional height will not result in an additional story and remains consistent with that of surrounding neighborhood and approved number of stories in the existing agreement. The Halifax MPS encourages effective urban design treatments and the use of high-quality exterior building materials. So these elements are regulated through the existing development agreement right as it stands. The 2-story street wall height and signage provisions remain unchanged from what was originally approved, and the inclusion of aluminum railings and glazing to acceptable building cladding materials is consistent with the existing exterior building materials. So during this application process, again, Nova Scotia Power installed power lines along Bilby, which impacted setbacks at upper levels of the proposed building. The applicant adjusted the building design to accommodate safety requirements. In result, floors 3 to 8 are shifted closer to the north property line, which abuts the development, the property with the development agreement for an 8-story mixed-use building, and then further from the property line from Bilby Street. So these step backs are regulated by the proposed development agreement. MPS policy calls for on-site open space and leisure areas, which are adequate for building residents. The amending agreement requires a minimum of 2,730 square feet of a combination of landscaped open space and recreational space within the building, and a minimum of 1,270 square feet of that to be located on level 2 as an outdoor patio. So that's remains unchanged from what was previously approved, that landscape patio on level 2. These minimums are higher than what's in the existing agreement. We calculated them incrementally based on the number of additional units. So the applicant is actually proposing a combination of landscaped open space and recreational space that far exceeds the minimums required by the amending agreement. So for parking, the development agreement requires the minimum of 41 interior parking spaces, which equates to approximately 0.6 spaces per unit. So staff considered the need for parking in a building based on its location to relation to transit connections, opportunities for active transportation, and the community desire for less costly housing. So the building's well located within regular and frequent bus service on Gottagen and Roby Streets. Atlantic car share is also available in the area. And then additionally, bicycle parking facilities are required as per the Land Use Bylaw, which is 1 space for every 2 units, and then additional based on, I believe, 1 per 300 meters squared of commercial use as well. So minimizing the required number of parking spaces can reduce construction costs, which can contribute to less costly units. Under these circumstances, staff support the proposed parking requirements. So staff have reviewed the proposal in terms of all of the relevant policy criteria and advise that the proposal is reasonably consistent with the intent of both the Halifax MPS and the Regional Centre MPS. The proposed non-substantive changes appear to consider the relationship of new development to adjacent properties and mitigate impacts through effective urban design, while also providing adequate amenity areas and landscaped open space for residents. Therefore, staff recommend that Halifax and West Community Council approve the proposed amending development agreement. Thank you.
All right. There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Brittany, for that very thorough staff report presentation. Would somebody, I'm just wondering now, Krista, I've never done an application like this before. Should we give the applicants an opportunity to ask questions, or
No.
just of Brittany?
Yeah, so there's not really an opportunity. This isn't a public hearing, it's for second reading. So the applicants are present. If there are questions of clarification from members of the council, they can then be recognized and respond to questions, but it's not up for debate or discussion.
All right, any questions of clarification then? None?
I think Councillor Mason had his hand. Okay, he's fine.
Click the wrong button.
No?
All right, I'll put the motion on the floor then.
All right, thank you.
I move the Halifax West Community Council one approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially the same form set out in attachment A in the staff report dated January 4th, 2022, and two, acquire development agreement to be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable peer periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, the approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end.
All right. Seconded by Councillor Mason.
So
and Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. So really quickly, when I first, as my time at council, seen this application, I didn't have much support for the previous application that came to council. But when the new owners who we're dealing with today, they came with a revised application that really looked at better form and better integration and more aligned with where the center plan was at the time. I definitely feel that this is a better application that we're getting. And these changes are really not substantial. The only concern that I had was the height aspect, but that was cleared up with Brittany's presentation. So I think really what we're looking at today is I don't have many concerns. It's already been approved. The changes are minimal in context of what's been approved. So in that sense, I don't really have much more to add. And yeah, that's really it for me.
All right. I don't see any more people wanting to ask questions. What's the wish of council here?
Question.
All right, question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. And on to the next. Case 13.1.2, case 23936, amending development agreement for 2858 2866 Gottagen Street and 5516 5518 McCarra Street, Halifax. And we have another staff presentation from Megan Maughan.
This one actually, Madam Vice Chair, staff does not have a presentation, but they're available for questions. They have spoken to the area councillor who indicated that they didn't feel a presentation was needed. Steve Adams is the applicant and is present in the meeting if there are questions of clarification from members of the community council.
Great. Any questions of clarification?
I'll put the motion on the floor and just speak really quickly. This is a time extension, so that's why I didn't think that presentation was needed. But obviously, if members want, we can change that. So I move the Halifax West Community Council approve by resolution the proposed amending development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form set out in attachment A of the staff report dated January 5th, 2022, and to require the agreement be signed by the property owner within 240 days or an extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end.
Second.
All right, seconded by Councillor Mason. Anything more to add there, Councillor Smith?
No, not much. Again, this is a time extension, pretty much in line with what we're doing with center plan in terms of extensions. And what I do support in this case, and the owner who has owned many properties in this neighborhood directly is looking to build themselves on this. So I definitely support them holding this property and doing the work on it themselves as well. So I support the extension to allow them to finish some other projects and get started on this one.
Yeah, that's great. Seeing no more questions or comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? No, motion carried.
All right, I'll steal the chair back from under you. So thank you for doing your thing. We got through it. Good job. So we deferred 1313 to next meeting, which is case 23166, municipal planning strategy amendments for 7 McIntosh Street, Halifax. So we then now move on to 14 motions of members, which I believe there are none. Don't see any. And in our in-camera minutes, if we have a mover to approve our in-camera minutes.
So moved, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Cuttle. Appreciate it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. All right. We have no added items. Public participation. Do we have any members of the public who signed up for public participation?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
All right. So our next meeting is March 8th, 2022, and I call for adjournment.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. Appreciate staff, presidents, applicants, all those, and I'll see you, council colleagues, tomorrow morning.